Welcome back to my little channel. Today I will address an Indian feminist telling us how we need feminism because, well, everything in India is obviously the same than everything in the rest of the world, especially in the Western world where women have it so incredibly bad. I mean, easily as bad as women in India, right? I doubt that too, but let's hear what she has to say anyway, shall we?
Let's start with a simple experiment. What do you see?
A silhouette of someone. But I guess that's not the answer you're looking for, so I'm curious to hear what you think it is.
Most of you might say it's the picture of a man.
Taken with the worst camera in the world?
But is it? So, what about now? A woman?
Aha! It was a silhouette. There you go. But, yeah, someone. Could it be a woman? Well, I don't want to fall guilty of assuming its gender, now do I? But in all fairness, yeah, it does look like a woman to me.
I say it's just a human.
Yeah, that silences me being shocked. I would never think someone promoting feminism would even dare suggest that women are not human. Yeah, I want to say something smart here, but...
But the real question here is, why are we always so insistent on attaching the idea of gender to everything?
Okay, I know this is nasty of me, but I'm going to say it anyway. First off, only language has gender. Biological beings have a sex. And why do biological beings have a sex? Well, that has something to do with procreation and all that. So, why do people like to see whether someone is a man or a woman? Well, other than because of defense, because yeah, self-defense is an issue, procreation is another one. And how is defense one? Well, in all fairness, in domestic situations, women are far more likely to commit violence towards everyone else. Men, on the other hand, are more adept at using violence against people they don't know. So there is that. Yeah, but the domestic violence figures show that men are far higher in hitting women. Yeah, the thing is, those domestic violence research thingies also show that 70% of the domestic violence situations is initiated by women. Men just tend to hit harder. That's biology for you. I'm sorry, we got sidetracked. So why is it important that we recognize a man is a man and a woman is a woman? Because it's easier to communicate with each other when we know whom we are communicating with.
It's not our fault for thinking in such binary terms, because that's how we've been programmed to think.
Well, that's a novel idea. I never thought of evolution as being programming, but okay, I can go with that.
We look at men and women differently, even when we don't want to. There is just no escaping this, because this conditioning began before you could even help it.
Programming, conditioning. I can't escape the feeling that you're trying to push us into a certain idea here. Obviously, considering where it's coming from. But could it be that this is something that happened for the last, several thousands of years, several hundred thousands of years, perhaps even? I'm not an evolutionary psychologist, but it seems humans need something to survive, procreation being one of those things. And to do that, you need to know who's the man and who's the woman. And funny enough, we can absolutely recognize things that men are better at and that women are better at. Almost as if it's by design.
It began before you were even born, when your parents were wondering if your toddler's suit should be pink or blue.
Yeah, it didn't start with your parents, to be honest. And to be honest, blue used to be the color for women, and light blue used to be the color for girls, And pink used to be the color for boys, and red used to be the color for men. It's a fashion thing. Stuff like that will change again. How that has to do with sex is beyond me.
And then there was just no going back, was there?
You do know there are lots of men that like the color pink in their garment, and lots of women that don't want to be seen dead with pink in their garment, right? Which means that there is a going back. Or at least on fashion choices there is. On biology, yeah, not so much, you're correct.
Let me tell you a story. Tell me if this sounds familiar. Once upon a time, there lived a fair and beautiful princess. Everyone in the kingdom loved her, except for the evil witch, who was jealous of her beauty. So she cursed the princess, and only a true love's kiss could save her. So finally, a very strong and handsome prince defeated the witch, kissed the princess, saved her, and they lived happily ever after.
Yeah, it's a metaphor. It's rather a common metaphor, actually. Old women don't like young women because young women remind them of their former self and their beauty, and therefore they talk down to young women, making young women feel insecure and small, until the young women find partners who will then uplift them, because those partners will tell those young women they are very important, both to the world and to them, obviously, and with that they undermine the power of the old women. So something tells me this is not the sort of story you like to see, though, or rather this is not how you recognize it. It's a very old trope. You can see it in millions of stories worldwide. It's so common that the most threatening person to a young woman is an old woman, that they made so many tales about it, and still most people don't recognize it. It's funny, almost as if we don't want to recognize it.
This is the plot of almost every fairy tale we grew up with.
Yeah, it's a very common metaphor. It happens so often in reality that they created millions of stories based on this metaphor. I'm glad you recognize it.
These stories reek of sexism, but we never realized that when we were enjoying them. I mean, I loved Cinderella, her beautiful dress, her fairy godmother's magic, the handsome prince.
The evil stepsisters that didn't like her youth and beauty and kept her enslaved because they were mean.
I was completely sold on that happily ever after. I never questioned why Cinderella could only be happy after she met the prince.
Yeah, I'm not Indian, so it could be a cultural thing, but in the West, we consider enslavement bad. And don't forget, it's the fairy godmother to help her be rescued. So the man could be considered a tool from the fairy godmother if you want to.
Or why she needed a fairy godmother to solve all her problems.
Okay, let me get this straight. Stepsister oppress and enslave her. Man saves her. Man bad. Man only saves her because of godmother. Godmother bad. Enslavement good?
Or why she never stood up to her evil stepmother. Wait, why did the stepmother have to be evil in the first place?
And the sisters, evil stepmother and evil stepsisters. Yeah, why? I can't answer, because reality often proves this is the case, I guess.
My ideas of what is normal, what is right, what would make me happy, what is beautiful, was slowly being defined by a system that glorified inequality. These stories taught me that being fair means being beautiful, that witches are always evil, and that all my problems would disappear if a big, strong man showed up.
You do know that for the longest time in human history, when it came to safety, women needed men. When it came to security, women needed men. And the concept of beauty is only in the eye of the beholder, so whatever you consider fair, someone else might not. But what old women consider fair is youth. That's the whole thing. It's the dwindling of youth. But I wish I could actually talk to you to make you realize the mistakes you are portraying here. And I wonder who indoctrinated you into believing this. But that's just me, I guess.
For the longest time, I continued believing in them. But then I was introduced to the F word.
Feminism?
No, not that F word. The other F word, which is so simple, yet so misunderstood.
Other F word? You mean fiction? I'm not sure if fiction is that misunderstood, but there are people who think that fiction is reality. It's kind of funny because feminism is fiction as well. But, right. Okay, not feminism, fiction then. That's my second guess.
I'm talking about feminism here.
Yeah, feminism was my first guess, but I guess you were just confusing the situation by assuming that I would be wrong anyway, weren't you? Biology proves you wrong on the man are equal than woman thing, though. Sociologically speaking, yeah, sure, both have equal values. There isn't a society that can survive without men and women. Funny enough, a society can survive with, well, relatively few men. A society cannot survive with relatively few women. So there is a very big distinction between men and women. But biologically speaking, they are 100% not the same.
My aunt was the first person who introduced me to feminism. She was also the person who introduced me to books like Pride and Prejudice and Little Women. Pride and Prejudice is still one of my favorite books till date. I loved how Elizabeth defied societal norms in the Victorian era. And it got me thinking, why weren't we introduced to such strong and independent characters from the very beginning?
Okay, so the evil witch story is bad, but Pride and Prejudice is better because reasons. By the way, short story long, Pride and Prejudice was about a daughter not wanting to marry the one that the mother wanted her to marry, but she wanted to marry someone else out of love, and the mother had a problem with that. So let me recapture this in a line you already had. Pretty woman, evil witch, man needs to save her. Seems Pride and Prejudice isn't that far-fetched from that storyline, is it? And yes, it's a little bit more complicated than girl wants to marry man, mother is against it, because then there's another man that tries to prevent it, and then there's another girl, and that man wants to marry another girl, but the other girl doesn't want to marry that man because he prevented the first marriage in the first place, so the man then fixes the first marriage so that it still happens, and then she wants to marry the second man. It's not that complicated, really. I'm just trying to do it fast, but it's the same trope. Man saves woman.
Okay, let's be real. 3 or 4-year-olds can't go around reading Pride and Prejudice. So they are going to learn from Cinderella and Snow White.
And they learn roughly the same thing as they're going to learn from Pride and Prejudice.
Which means that these characters had to become stronger role models.
See, the thing is, it's not so much that our story characters, especially our fairy tale story characters, which are told to children, need to become stronger. On average, they are one-dimensional. Why? Because it's quite difficult for young children to understand the intricacies of human interaction. Apparently the same is true for some older women, it seems, because you don't recognize it's the same storyline. It's just that certain intricacies, certain depths within the character have been expanded on. It's not so much that they are inherently different, they're more complete, as you will. I love the fact that you started with the storylines and then basically don't recognize the storylines. It's almost as if you're pushing a narrative. Well, obviously you are, because it's that F word in it. And it wasn't fiction, it seemed. I still think it is, by the way. I'm going to end responding to her TEDx talk here. I mean, I've only covered about a few minutes at most. I know I'm lengthy with my words, it seems. But yeah, if you're interested, go look it up. I won't link it because I can't be asked to find it. I mean, I downloaded this video some time ago and I can't remember where I found it. Obviously, I found it at TEDx, but that's about all the knowledge I have. It is, to me, however, very interesting that the tropes that feminists always rail against are the very tropes that they also want to promote. It's almost as if you can't win. I mean, man, bad, okay, yeah, sure, whatever you want to say, because women needs to be saved, and it's terrible that men need to save them. But when there's a strong, independent woman, she can then bind herself to a man, because that's what strong, independent women do. Isn't that the same thing? I mean, the Pride and Prejudice story talks about how one daughter wants to marry another guy, and the friend of that guy basically shoos that first guy away because he's a wastrel. I mean, he wastes money and gambling debts, and he doesn't want the family of that one woman being incurred with this problem because he loves the sister of that one woman and he wants to marry the sister of that woman, who's then angry with that one man because she learns that that one man chased away the one man her sister loved. Trying to talk about it fast, it is kind of a headache dossier, one would say, but at the same time, it's still man looks out for and after women, and women therefore likes men, because this is what the end is. In the end, she does marry the man she didn't want to marry because he chased away another man. Only afterwards he then gave them an opportunity to get married. It's the whole thing of our world. It's reality in itself. Men create circumstances for women to live under, and they do everything they can to make women happy. Women create circumstances so that men need to fix things. It's not nice to say, but this is the reality of things. And in all fairness, I, for the life of me, can't imagine what would happen if men are basically told they can't fix things. Well, actually, we do know what happens. We see them dropping out of schools. We see them stopping to perform in high-end jobs because why bother? We see men going their own way because why bother? It's a dreadful thing for a society when certain members of that society feel that they no longer have a reason to care. I guess we have to thank feminism for that. Anyway, I'm going to quit now because it's been long enough as it is. Like, share and subscribe if you feel so inclined. I am looking forward to hearing from you. Are there any tropes out there, story-wise, that aren't, well, stereotypical? I haven't found any. I mean, we've all had the same stories, heard them before and before and before. There's a reason why stories are stereotypical, because they're recognizable. And they're not recognizable because of the story, they're recognizable because of reality. Anyway, criticism as always is more than welcome. I hope to see you all next time.